And welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Before we talk about the poem, I'm going to read the poem just so that you get a sense of the totality of the message. So, two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So take a moment, kind of absorb what he is saying. The poet itself is Robert Frost himself, early 20th century, and really the tail end of American realism. This is just before the onset of modernism, which had a much more cynical or nihilistic view of life. So this is still the era of the American individualist. I can do anything I need to do because I can handle my life, give or take. So let's look at stanza 1. We have in our first line, two roads diverged in a yellow wood. Yellow wood implies autumn. And autumn, if you think about it, is more about that transition to aging. We're seeing the leaves turn yellow and red and turning into fall. And from fall, when those leaves literally fall onto the ground, we are looking then at winter. And in that symbolic type of language that poetry often uses, yellow is aging, and then we get to the black of death. The other big metaphor in this stanza is the fork in the road. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. And this is a metaphor for life decisions. We oftentimes think about what's next, what's going to happen, how are we as individuals going to make the right decision. And that's in quotation marks. There's no right or wrong decision oftentimes. The undergrowth that he sees in the distance indicates that these trees have grown over an older forest. And this really represents the idea that all of our choices are based on our experiences up to that point. And often the choice we make is simply something so straightforward that it doesn't really register till years later when you go, oh, I'm so glad I made that choice instead of the other choice. So in stanza 2, we are looking at the path themselves. So he looked down, he's like, that one looks like somebody's already been down it. I'm going to do the other one. And when he is walking along there, he realizes that they really have about the same level of wear, meaning other people have walked this road. And again, this concept of appeared less traveled, meaning, he recognizes that he's going down a path that others have too, but, he's okay with it. Going back up to the first line, then took the other as just as fair. So, fair in terms of pretty or beautiful, but it can also mean reasoned and well balanced. So you're looking at a choice. Both are fair, well-reasoned options, and we have to make that choice. And that choice oftentimes can be the scariest thing, but if it works out, we all look at it with great happiness. And, what we're seeing through this is Frost incorporating this American sense of individualism into his choice. So, this sense of, I just have to rely on my own sense of self, which, honestly sounds great. And, but he's already saying, oh, wait a second. I took a path that others have already been on, and I didn't take the path that others have been on. So, I'm making my own path. And it's a path others have been on. So, am I the individualist that I claim to be? Stanza 3, we get a little bit less joyous acceptance. He plans to walk the other path, but he also knows the way things go in life, you're not going to come back to that point. The other aspect of that is that, and both the morning equally lay. So again, equally is similar to fair in the previous stanza. So he's still talking about two reasonable options, whether or not you become a plumber or you become a lawyer. Both of those are equally viable options. Finally, in stanza 4, he says he's going to be telling this with a sigh. And again, that sigh seems almost like is that a good thing or a bad thing? And if you think about the stories we tell in our lives, sometimes you can put a positive spin, even on the worst situations. What did you learn? Where did you come from in terms of who you were versus who you are now? He's also looking at the fact that the path he decided, though he imagined was less traveled, wasn't. And ultimately, where he goes with that is this idea that the choice he made all the difference in his life, even though those choices had been made before him and will be made after him. So, you can see also in the way that he writes somewhere, ages and ages hence, this idea of age and language becoming archaic. Nowhere else did we see words like ages and ages or hence. We just see his reflection of his individualism and how he sees himself, his own identity. So, we think about the major choices in our lives. Do I marry this person or do I break up with them and look for somebody new? Or do I, you know, um, get married and have a career, get married and have a baby, get married, have a baby and a career? These are all choices. And he looks back on the choices he's made and he's anxious, but ultimately hopeful that he has made his life as wonderful as he feels it is by the choices he's made. So, when we look at the literary style, we have to think about the poem and what it does. And it's a retroactive narrative. He's telling his story from current to past. So he's looking at his triumphs and his tragedies as a matter of choice or decision making, not as things that have happened to him. And that is reflective of individualism, but it's also the irony of individualism. The choices we make are based on the options we are experiencing. Some people have a lot of options in life because of their family or their socioeconomic status. Other people don't. So he's really, in a sense, talking about this idea of individualism and the irony of us thinking we can pull our socks up and take care of business. But if we don't have the people around us who can help us, then that's ironic as well. So what ultimately I think Frost is saying is if we can look back on our lives and attach a narrative to our lives, then we can, in fact, Be happy because we have made our own personal narrative with a happy ending. And, that is ultimately the goal for most of us, is to be able to look back on our lives when we're old and gray and say, okay, this was a choice, this was a choice, this is a choice, and it all worked out wonderfully. And that's what life is all about, is telling your own story in your own way. So, if you have any questions or need more information, please don't hesitate to send me a message or leave a comment. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.